So let's go ahead and start talking about our topic for today. So our topic for today is all about marine animal rescue, rehabilitation, and release. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about this. So I'm sure you guys are aware to some degree that that we do rescue animals in the ocean, and we can rehabilitate them and we can release them back into the ocean. So guys, let me ask you this question here. Do you think we rehabilitate sharks? Guys, so the answer is actually no. Do not really rehabilitate sharks. They're very, very hard to rehabilitate. They require to be moving constantly. They need really, really large areas to be kept in. So it's very, very hard to rehabilitate. Also, guys, if you guys think about aquariums that you go to, you don't see a lot of large sharks, right? Because they just cannot be kept in that area very easily. So the Georgia Aquarium does have a whale shark, but you don't see great white. You don't see tiger sharks really in aquariums. So it's the same kind of thought process there. It's very hard to rehabilitate sharks because they just require so much space and they need to be constantly moving. And it's just not very difficult, especially for these groups that are rehabilitating. There's just not enough space to rehabilitate sharks. They'll do what they can. So I know of some researchers that found some sharks entangled in fishing line. So they just ended up just cutting that fishing line off the shark. But usually it's very hard to rehabilitate sharks. So we don't necessarily do that. Just like we don't really rehabilitate fish. It's like other bony fish. It's very hard. And it's just a lot. It's not very well understood right now. So we don't spend a lot of money and effort rehabilitating different fish. Let me ask you guys the next question. Do we rehabilitate larger whales? Right. The answer is no. We actually do not rehabilitate larger whales either. It's very, very, think about just the transport. To transport a large whale is very, very difficult, very expensive, very hard. And then to have an area that a large whale can be, they need a large amount of space. They need to be able to swim and move and dive deep. A lot of whales, larger whales, dive very, very deep. And we just don't have an holding area that we can put a whale that they can go that depth that they need to. So it's very, very hard to rehabilitate larger whales. It's not a very common thing. If we rehabilitate whales, we rehabilitate smaller ones. All right. Now, guys, I have another question for you. This one is, do we rehabilitate sea turtles? Yes or no? Is yes, we do rehabilitate sea turtles. They are one of the more easier organisms to rehabilitate. They don't need a large space. They don't need to dive deep. And you can put several in one holding area so they can, get better. So we definitely rehabilitate sea turtles, and they're fairly easy to transport compared to your other animals. All right, good job, guys. So let's go ahead and move on. So, guys, we are talking about the 3 R's. That is rescue, rehabilitate, release. That's the sequence that you really want to do these things in. What animals do we rehabilitate? So we rehabilitate cetaceans, so dolphins and smaller whales. We rehabilitate what we call pinnipeds, so seals, sea lions, things like that. Reptiles, so sea turtles. Birds, they actually do rehabilitate a lot of birds. Manatees, and other marine mammals such as otters. And this is just what I'm talking about in terms of like marine animals. We actually rehabilitate a lot of animals in the wild. I used to intern at a rehabilitation place up in Tallahassee, and we worked with possums and squirrels. But we're talking about marine animals today. But those are the ones that we rehabilitate. Today, I'm going to be talking about sea turtles, dolphins, and manatees. And because those are the most common ones that we rehabilitate here in the Florida Keys and in Florida. So I'm going to talk about those the most. First, let me kind of talk about the steps to rescuing. And let me start with this next question for you guys. What should you do if you see a distressed animal? So guys, say you're walking on the beach and you see an animal that is on the beach and it should be in the ocean, or say you're on the boat and you see something's wrong with this sea turtle, dolphin, or manatee, what should you do? What should be the first thing to do? All right, guys, good. The answer is to call someone. So you should call someone if you see an animal that is distressed. Who you call depends on where you live. So in Florida, you would call FWC, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Down here, you'd call FWC. If I found a sea turtle, I would call the turtle hospital. So depending on where you guys live, if it's a sea turtle, there's usually a sea turtle hospital nearby. So you'd call them, or you'd call your state wildlife government. For us, it's the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, so FWC. For you guys in other states, it might be a little different. So definitely look that up after this lesson and find out who you should call if you see a distressed animal. All right, guys, when you find an animal, say you are a first responder and you work with a turtle hospital or a dolphin rescue group or a manatee rescue group, the first thing that they do is they gather information. So you see the animal and you kind of look around and see what's going on in the area. So you size up the scene and then you approach with care as a first responder. Okay, guys, I'm not talking about you all. I'm talking about as a first responder, someone who's trained, you approach with care. And for dolphins, it's very important to protect the blowhole, the eyes, and the flippers. So you want to protect those. You definitely want to make sure nothing gets into the eyes or the blowhole. And a big thing that these first responders need to do is keep the skin moist. That goes for all marine animals. They need to have their skin hydrated. If it dries out, it's very, very bad for that animal. So they want to keep the skin moist. A lot of people with sea turtles, they'll put a damp towel over the turtle. All right, so once that stranding team approaches, so if it's on land, if it's on a beach, when the stranding team approaches, they'll use that information gathered by the first responder to create a plan. Can it just get back into the ocean, or does it need to go in? So then they'll do a physical exam. They'll figure out the age of it. They'll see if it's hydrated. You can see if it's lethargic, if it's malnourished. They'll see how it's breathing. They can see the temperature. And again, after that, they will decide, does it need to be brought in, or can it just go back into the ocean? Did it just get stuck by a storm? So let's first talk about our sea turtles. Now, guys, I have 2 worksheets for you all that you can work on during this lesson. The first one is an anatomy morphology paper, so you can just label the parts of the turtle, the dolphin, and the manatee. The second worksheet, worksheet 2, will actually give you like different symptoms and issues, and then you can fill out what you think the diagnosis is and what species it affects. So now I'm going to tell you about sea turtles, dolphins, and manatees, and tell you about some of the more common issues that they will come to a rehab center with, or some of the more common issues that they have to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about the sea turtle. Remember, there are 7 species in the world. They're reptiles, but they do come on land to lay eggs. They have eyes, they have a mouth. Their shell is actually called a carapace, and their stomach is called a plastron, and they also have flippers. Guys, again, remember, if you want to learn more about sea turtles, we do have a whole sea turtle lesson. But there are a lot of issues that our sea turtles face. So I looked at the website that the Turtle Hospital down here has a bunch of information on. So again, guys, the Turtle Hospital, it's located in Marathon. It's in the Florida Keys, and they were one of the first turtle hospitals to be created, and they do a lot of really great work. So one of the most common issues that sea turtles have to deal with is what we call impactions. So impactions is when they eat a lot of stuff and it just gets stuck in their stomach. Usually it's plastic, because guys, plastic is synthetic, it's not natural, and it doesn't break down very easily, especially in the stomach of an animal. So when sea turtles eat plastic, which is very, very common, it's very easy for a sea turtle to eat plastic. They're going to eat whatever they can see. Plastic bags look like jellyfish. Other little pieces of plastic look like shrimp or sponges and such. So they'll eat the plastic. It fills in their stomach, and it doesn't go away. They can't get it out. So then it just builds up, and they get a blockage, and it can lead to starvation in these sea turtles. So They actually, if you look on the sea turtle hospital's website, they have photos of all the plastic that they pull out of the sea turtle stomachs. What they do to treat sea turtles with impactions is they actually give them a combination of Metamucil, fiber, and vegetable oil. And they pretty much just give that sea turtle that mixture, and they wait for the sea turtle to pass or defecate all that plastic. It can't happen naturally. They have to give it those that kind of combination of stuff because it helps them kind of go more easily. So for that one, again, for impactions, so a large amount of plastic in their stomach, the sea turtles usually get Metamucil, fiber, and vegetable oil. Another common issue is entanglement. So a lot of sea turtles get stuck in fishing line and hooks. So that's a very, very big issue. Remember, guys, fishing line takes 600 years to kind of degrade down. Plastic still stays in the environment forever. So if that fishing line is on that sea turtle, it's going to sea turtles kind of swim like this in circular movements with their flippers. So that really helps the fishing line get more and more entangled in there. Sometimes the sea turtle will actually lose a flipper because of that. Sea turtles can also drown if they have too much of that fishing gear on them. So that's a very, very big issue. And some of the main treatments is just removing it. Sometimes they may have to amputate a flipper, and then they'll treat the wounds accordingly. Alrighty, guys. The next one is boat strikes. This is also very, very common. So it is actually kind of a funny little information that I have for you guys. This one's on your worksheet. So sea turtles have a very hard carapace shell, but it's not as hard as a boat. So when boats run over sea turtles, which is very, very common, I've seen a lot of sea turtles that have unfortunately been run over. It can cause cuts in them. It can cause deformities. And sometimes when a sea turtle gets hit by a boat, it causes them to float. So it's still a little unknown as to why this exactly happens. But scientists think that when sea turtles get hit by boats, air will actually get trapped inside their carapace shell or cause damage to the lungs and the muscles. And then those sea turtles float and they get a bubble-like shape in their carapace shell. And they've actually, it's really funny, they've actually named that symptom bubble butt syndrome. So there's a sea turtle at the Marathon Sea Turtle Hospital that cannot be released, and it's got a bubble in its carapace, and they call him bubble butt. And that was kind of the name for this issue. When a sea turtle gets hit by a boat and air gets trapped in their carapace shell and they develop a bubble. From that point on, they can't dive down. So one way they treat it is they'll actually attach lead weights to the carapace shell so that sea turtle can dive down. But those weights do fall off. So if a sea turtle comes in with bubble butt syndrome, it cannot be released. It has to stay in captivity for the rest of its life. Another issue we have, especially down here, is FIBROPAPILLOMATOSIS. So this is kind of a mouthful. We call it FP for short. So papillomatosis, or FP, definitely impacts our green sea turtles the most. It's actually a tumor that looks like cauliflower, and it grows all over the sea turtle. It grows specifically kind of by where their flippers and their carapace shell meets, or around their eyes. And guys, that's really bad because as it grows bigger and bigger, they can no longer swim. They can no longer see. So on their flippers, necks, eyes, sometimes they'll get the tumors internally. That's a very big issue. Fibropapillomatosis has something to do with our water quality. Scientists are still figuring it out. What they do if a sea turtle is brought in with FP, they will remove the tumors. So they'll do surgery. And since there is no cure or vaccine, those sea turtles with FP actually have to stay in that turtle hospital for a full year. So they have to stay there for a full year without getting any new tumors. So that way they can build antibodies to become immune to that fibropapillomatosis. So again, guys, if a sea turtle comes in with those tumors, those cauliflower-like warts, they get them surgically removed, and they have to have a clean bill of health for a full year before they get to go back out to the wild. So that's a very long time for a sea turtle to have to be in. Another common issue that actually happens with all three of our animals today, cold stunning is a big thing. So sea turtles, dolphins, manatees, all are affected by cold stunning. That is when the water gets too cold and that animal's internal body temperature gets very, very stressed out and they can no longer move. So sea turtles will become cold stunned when temperatures in the water are 50 degrees or below. So 50 degrees Fahrenheit or below. And it causes a decrease in their heart rate and their circulation slows down and they become very lethargic. They can't move. So usually when these animals are cold stunned, all that really needs to happen is they just need to get warmed up, put into a warmer container, and then they get re-released into warmer temperatures. Sometimes in like the more northern areas in the winter, they'll have sea turtles get cold stunned and they'll actually bring them down to Florida to where the water is a little warmer and then they can get re-released there. So cold stunning doesn't have to be an issue, but it can lead to pneumonia and death in these animals as well. What common kitchen item do they use to treat sea turtles? Milk, garlic, honey, bread. All right, guys, so the answer is actually honey. They actually use honey to treat a lot of wounds on sea turtles and land turtles and tortoises as well. So honey actually has a lot of antibacterial properties. And so what they'll do is they'll actually apply honey to the turtle's carapace when they have the boat strikes or when they have the wounds from the fishing line, maybe they have a shark bite. So whatever kind of open wound that a sea turtle has, they'll put honey on it, a very nice antibacterial natural substance. So some actual sea turtle rescue centers have their own beehives, so they can use bee honey right from the source. So that's very, very cool. A little fun fact for you guys. Honey is actually very helpful in helping sea turtles, land turtles, and tortoises. All right, guys, so let's talk now about dolphins. So again, guys, for our dolphins, they have a fluke, which is their tail. They have flippers or fins. Their top fin is called a dorsal fin. The front part of their head is called a melon. So the front part of their head is called a melon. Their mouth area is called a rostrum, and then they have teeth. They also have ears and eyes as well. So again, guys, your cetaceans are whales and dolphins, and they usually can be found in large groups called pods. So that leads me to my next question, guys, because we're going to talk about this. What is a mass stranding? Is a mass stranding when multiple animals get stuck at once or when one animal gets lost in the ocean? Okay, guys, so the answer is when multiple animals get stuck at once. That is what we call a mass stranding. So remember, these animals usually travel in groups called pods. So a stranding is defined as when marine mammals such as cetaceans, pinnipeds, or sirenians, so manatees, sea lions, seals, dolphins, whales, either come ashore alive under a strange circumstance, or they're injured close to shore, or they wash ashore dead, usually individually or in groups. So some things that can cause these strandings are magnetic disturbances in Earth's poles and creates an error in their navigation. So a lot of our marine animals use the magnetic field in Earth to kind of just navigate around. Remember, sea turtles go back to the beach they were born on using that same kind of system. So that could be an issue. Maybe the change in the beach area got them stuck. They didn't expect there to be it to get shallow really quickly. A lot of times is because one of that pod is sick or injured. So if one of the dolphins in that pod are sick or injured, they'll go into shore and then the rest will follow them. So the pod will follow that dolphin that goes off on its own. And that's how you get these mass strandings usually. Sometimes you'll also have weak, malnourished orphan dolphins going onto shore. Maybe some severe weather conditions. So after Hurricane Irma, we definitely had a lot of stranded manatees. But again, guys, the biggest thing is when one of those animals, in this example, a dolphin, so when one of those dolphins aren't feeling too good, or the whales, they will go close to shore, which will then cause all the rest of the healthy ones to go on shore, and then it causes a big issue. Down here, we actually have a lot of pilot whales that strand themselves on the shallow sandbars and areas, and it's usually one or a few of them are sick. And it's very hard to deal with after that. Not a lot of them survive after that because, you know, they were sick. Something was very wrong with them to cause them to come ashore. If you don't rescue that animal immediately after stranded, you know, if it has wounds, a shark could come eat it. It could get sicker and sicker. It could get dry, and you don't want it to get dry. So if they do bring that animal, those animals that strand into a treatment center, what they'll do is they'll perform blood tests and immediately get fluids while they determine what's going on. Is that animal sick, or was it just following the pack? What happened? Then they'll give it proper nutrition and antibiotics if they need it, and things like that. All right, the next thing that a lot of our dolphins will actually experience is called morbillivirus. So this one, you can probably already guess it doesn't sound too good. So morbillivirus doesn't sound good. It kind of sounds like the word morbid. So this is not a good thing that happens. And this is another big reason why your dolphins and whales will actually strand. So it's a virus that causes disease in these animals. Actually have a version of it that can affect dogs and even humans. So measles is actually a version of this virus. We know back in the day, measles actually used to be very, very deadly. Now we have vaccines to treat it, so it's okay. They don't have that for dolphins. And they actually had a huge outbreak of morbillivirus happen that killed over 1,500 dolphins between New York and Florida in July of 2013. So that was a big, big outbreak and death toll that we had for our dolphins. If an animal is found to have morbillivirus, they actually can rehabilitate it because it can infect the other animals that are healing. So they cannot rehabilitate an animal with virus, which is very upsetting. Another issue that dolphins can have is LOBOMYCOSIS, and it's actually a fungal infection that will affect their skin, usually by their dorsal fin and their mouth. And it looks like a fungus. It kind of looks almost like what the sea turtles have with the FIBROPAPILLOMATOSIS. The LOBOMYCOSIS affects the dolphins and actually can affect humans as well. What they'll do is they'll surgically remove it. But usually if a dolphin has LOBOMYCOSIS, it probably has some other health issues going on, like it has a compromised immune system. So it's very hard to just treat that one. Another thing that can happen with all three of these animals, but definitely dolphins, is pneumonia. I'm sure you guys have heard of pneumonia before. But pneumonia is an issue. So guys, dolphins don't have what we call cilia. So cilia are like nose hairs. So we all have nose hairs, most, I think. So you guys have nose hairs, and it actually protects things from going into your respiratory system. Dolphins don't have nose hairs along their respiratory tract. So a lot of particles, dust, and bacteria can get into their lungs very easily and cause pneumonia. So the treatment for that is correcting the environment, getting out of a dust area maybe, getting into cleaner water, and antibiotics. The animal that we're going to talk about are manatees. Okay. So manatees, remember, if you watched that lesson on them, they are sirenians or sirens. So they're related to dugongs. They are the original mermaids. Their close relatives are elephants. They have a paddle-like fluke or tail. They have flippers, and they actually have fingernails. They actually have elbows as well. They have nostrils, eyes, and they have these little whiskers here called vibrissae. So again, they have whiskers to help them feel around here. What action can cause manatees to depend on boats? Boat strikes are a big issue. So what activity can cause manatees to depend on boats? Feeding them fresh water, going fast, going slow, or feeding them rice? What can cause manatee to depend on boats? Okay, so the answer is feeding them fresh water. Remember, guys, a lot of people like to feed manatees fresh water from a hose because manatees do need fresh water. However, that causes them to depend on boats more. And when they depend on boats more, they get hit by boats. So they'll go up to a boat thinking that it's going to give them water, and then the propeller will cut them, and that's not good. Going fast or going slow does not cause a manatee to depend on boats, but it can affect how severe the wound is. Feeding rice, I don't think manatees eat rice. I know feeding them lettuce is also a very bad thing. but feeding them fresh water will actually cause manatee to become much more dependent on a boat, which can lead them to getting hit by a boat. So these boat strikes are the most common causes of death for the Florida manatee. Most of the manatees I've seen, at least, honestly, I think every manatee that I've seen has at least one propeller mark on it, what we call a prop scar. If a boat's moving faster, then the wound can actually be worse than if the boat is moving slower. That's why if you guys do boat down in Florida, you'll probably see caution, manatee zone, no wake. So you're too slow. So death may not happen immediately, but the manatee can suffer from serious internal injuries like broken ribs, internal bleeding, things like that, or it could be a surface wound. But if a manatee goes into rehabilitation, they'll just receive the proper medical care. So they'll treat the wounds maybe and allow for that manatee to heal before it will get relocated. Another thing that manatees have to deal with is called brevetoxicosis. And that is related to red tide. So it's toxins in the water. Again, it's related to red tide. It can cause nervous issues. So that manatee may start acting funny, neurological problems. It may not be able to swim as well. So it'll affect its mobility. It can also get them really, really sick. So brevetoxicosis is kind of comes with red tide. It causes neurological issues, mobility issues, and can cause death pretty quickly. All right. And again, guys, remember manatees can also have cold stunning as well. And they can also get stuck in fishing gear. So can dolphins. So that's another thing to talk about. Do all rehabbed animals get released? What do you think? Do all rehabbed animals get released? Yes or no? All right, guys, good. So the answer is no. Not all rehabbed animals get to be released. So I urge that if a sea turtle does not be released, a lot of animals, especially if they're showing neurological issues. I was reading about a sea lion that was found to have epilepsy. Things like that, a lot of times they can't be released. If that animal is blind, they cannot release it. If a sea turtle loses more than one flipper, it cannot be released, things like that. There are often times where rehabbed animals cannot get released. Once that happens, they will get transported to an aquarium somewhere else. So that way they can live the rest of their life in captivity and provide education to other people. So guys, a lot of animals that you do see in the aquariums here will actually be from different rehabs that, you know, couldn't release that animal for whatever reason. So that's very important to know that not every animal that you work on gets to go back into the wild. So guys, the final step of the 3 R's is release. In order to release an animal, it has to be in stable condition and it has to be cleared by a veterinarian. So all of its blood, everything has to be good before that veterinarian can say, yes, it can be released. They also have to be able to eat on their own. If an animal will not eat on their own, if it still relies on humans to feed them, then it cannot be released. Also, guys, if an animal looks like it's being way too friendly and too dependent on humans, then it can't be released as well. Oftentimes, it also requires a permit to release an animal. I know, especially with dolphins and manatees, if you are trying to release it, you have to get a permit to put it back into the ocean. They don't usually return the animal to where they rescued it because where they rescued that animal probably wasn't a good spot. So maybe that animal was beached in a shallow area. Maybe it was at a dock, things like that. They'll find a nice area that doesn't have a lot of people, so people won't go scare it and hurt it, and they'll release it in a nice quiet area for them to have the best chance of survival after. A lot of times they will put tracking devices on these animals so they can see where it's going. On the sea turtles, after they have been cared for, they actually get a little clip on their flipper. So that way, if any other hospital gets them or someone catches them somehow, you can actually look at the code on that little clip, and that way they can track to see where it's gone. So that's another very interesting thing that they can do. Guys, it is important to note that, you know, there are a lot of aquariums out in the world. A lot of them do have animals in captivity. But it is important to know that a lot of these places, like SeaWorld, they actually do a lot of good in terms of the rehabilitation. So SeaWorld has one of the biggest rehab centers for marine animals in the state. Same with Miami Sea Aquarium. So we have a lot of those aquariums that will actually work behind the scenes, things that you don't even get to see if you go there, but they have a lot of behind the scenes work that will actually care for all of these animals, and they provide a lot of good. A lot of the aquariums have that as well. Again, guys, I want to finish off with to remind you to find out what area, what person you should contact if you see a stranded animal. And guys, even if that animal isn't alive, it's important to report a dead animal as well, because a dead animal could actually teach us something about what happened. Maybe that animal died from plastic and they can learn that, or maybe there was some weird virus that animal died from. So all that is very important to know. If you see an animal that's stranded, dead, injured, having issues, find out who you should call. In Florida, you should call FWC. In the Florida Keys, if it's a turtle, you definitely should call Turtle Hospital as well. We have Dolphin Research Center here. We have Dolphin Care, Dolphin Plus that will also take care of manatees too. So we have a lot of groups here in the Keys that will actually go out and rescue these animals. If you live on the coast, there's most likely a group that you can call that can help out if there's an animal that needs help. So find out that. My last worksheet that I have for you guys is called a PSA, a public service announcement. It's just a craft for you guys to do on your own time. You can make a poster, and you can pick one of the animals you learned about today, or a different animal that we didn't learn about. And I have an example, and I just talk about like what are some common issues that this animal may be facing. So for me, I did a sea turtle. So is the sea turtle stuck in marine debris? Is it having trouble diving down? Does it have FIBROPAPILLOMATOSIS tumors? Things like that. And I said, if found, call this number. And I put the correct people to call. So that's something that you guys can do. And look up where you live, find out who to call, and make a little poster about it. If you guys do that, definitely take a picture and send it to us. All right, guys. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Friday, Miss Alex is going to be talking to you guys all about marine science careers.